Welcome to literary and jury charge practice. Let's start out with this literary, and it's called Grand Central Market. Ready? Here we go. Many Southern Californians have grandparents who rode the Angel's Flight Railway down from Bunker Hill to shop at Grand Central Market. Opened in 1917, Grand Central has never been slick. It is cavernous and has sawdust-covered floors, but on busy days the market is one of LA's most vibrant destinations. Like downtown itself, Grand Central is experiencing a renaissance as a new crop of restaurants and merchants joins longtime favorites. Open to both Broadway and Hill Street, Grand Central remains connected to its city. The sounds of buses and ranchera music float in from Broadway. Downtown workers create a midday rush as they come over to grab lunch, while the chopping of carnitas and carne asada adds a staccato backdrop to the low buzz of voices filling the old building. There are still many vintage businesses, longtime produce stands, and spots such as Valeria's, where endless varieties of dried chilies fill the bins. Of the 32 vendors operating at Grand Central, 12 have opened in the past 2 years. Everyone has been really welcoming, says Chef Micah Wexler, who recently opened Wexler's Deli at Grand Central. We all know that the market is changing, a work in progress, and we're in it together. All right, now let's try some jury charge practice. Ready? Here we go. 4. Count 1. Conspiracy to commit securities fraud. A. Introduction. I will now turn to Count 1 of the indictment, which charges that Mr. Martoma conspired with Dr. Gilman and Dr. Ross to violate federal statutes and regulations that make it unlawful to commit fraud in connection with the purchase or sale of securities. Title 18 United States Code Section 371 states, if 2 or more persons conspire to commit any offense against the United States and one or more of such persons do any act to effect the object of the conspiracy, each is guilty of an offense against the United States. A conspiracy is a kind of criminal partnership, an agreement between 2 or more people to join together to accomplish some unlawful purpose. The crime of conspiracy to commit securities fraud is an independent offense, separate and distinct from the substantive crime of securities fraud that I have instructed you on. Indeed, a defendant may be found guilty of this crime even if the charged conspiracy was not successful and no securities fraud was ever actually committed. That is because conspiracy to commit securities fraud is a standalone separate crime. B. Conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Elements of conspiracy. To meet its burden of proving the securities fraud conspiracy charged in Count 1 of the indictment, the government must prove the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that the conspiracy charged in Count 1 existed. That is, that between the summer of 2006 and July 29, 2008, an agreement or understanding between 2 or more people existed to commit securities fraud. Second, that Mr. Martoma intentionally and knowingly joined and participated in that conspiracy during the applicable time period. Third, that during the life of the conspiracy of the conspirators, not necessarily Mr. Martoma, knowingly committed at least one overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy in the Southern District of New York. C. First element, existence of a conspiracy. A conspiracy is a combination, agreement, or understanding between 2 or more people to accomplish by concerted action a criminal or unlawful purpose. For Count 1, the unlawful purpose alleged to be the object of the conspiracy is the commission of securities fraud. The gist or essence of the crime of conspiracy is an unlawful agreement between two or more people to violate the law. The first element of the crime of conspiracy thus has two parts: the unlawful agreement and the object of the conspiracy. First element, part 1, the agreement. To establish a conspiracy, the government is not required to show that two or more people sat down around a table and entered into a solemn pact, orally or in writing, stating that they had formed a conspiracy to violate the law and spelling out all the details of the plans and the means by which the unlawful project is to be carried out, or the part that each of the persons who is a party to the conspiracy is going to play. When people undertake to enter into a criminal conspiracy, which is often left to the unexpressed understanding, conspirators do not usually reduce their agreements to a formal writing. They don't typically publicly broadcast their plans. From its very nature, a conspiracy is almost always secret in its origin and execution. It is enough if two or more people in some way or manner, impliedly or tacitly, come to an understanding to violate the law. Express language or specific words are not required to indicate assent or agreement to the conspiracy. You need only find that two or more people entered into the unlawful agreement alleged in count 1 to find that a conspiracy existed. What the government must prove is that there was a mutual understanding, either spoken or unspoken, between two or more people to cooperate with each other to violate the law and to accomplish an unlawful act. In determining whether the government has proven the unlawful agreement alleged in count 1, you should consider the proven acts and conduct of the alleged co-conspirators undertaken to carry out the apparent criminal purpose. The adage, actions speak louder than words, is applicable here. Often the only evidence that is available is that of disconnected acts that, when considered in connection with one another, show a conspiracy or an agreement to secure a particular result, such as satisfactorily and conclusively as more direct proof. As I have said, it is not necessary that the conspiracy actually succeed for you to conclude that it existed. In deciding whether the conspiracy charged in count 1 existed, you may consider all the evidence of the acts, conduct, and statements of those you determine the government has proven were co-conspirators of Mr. Martoma, and the reasonable inferences to be drawn from that evidence. When people enter into a conspiracy to accomplish an unlawful end, they become agents or partners of one another in carrying out the conspiracy. In determining the factual issues before you, you may take into account against Mr. Martoma any acts or statements made by any of the alleged co-conspirators during the course of the conspiracy. Even though such acts or statements were not made in Mr. Martoma's presence or were made without his knowledge, it is sufficient to establish the existence of the conspiracy that you find beyond a reasonable doubt that the minds of at least two alleged conspirators met in an understanding way, and that they agreed, as I have explained, to work together to accomplish the objective of the conspiracy charged in count 1. Okay, let's see. What we have next for some literary practice. This is called Mind Games. Brain training exercises could sharpen your driving skills. Ready? Here we go. The words brain fitness might conjure up funny images of cartoon brains lifting weights, running on treadmills, or doing sit-ups and push-ups. But if you follow the news, you may have heard that there's a growing body of research surrounding the concepts of brain training. Studies report that our brain, like our muscles, can remold itself over the course of our life. So companies have teamed up with neuroscientists to create computer-based training exercises that are designed to help people improve their focus, memory, and ability to process information quickly. Recently, some of those companies have turned their attention toward improving basic driving skills, particularly for seniors, and the results have been encouraging. For example, academic research has shown that cognitive training, the basis for the POSIT Science Drive Sharp program for senior drivers, helps reduce the likelihood that an older driver will be involved in an at-fault car accident. Given their success, POSIT and other companies are starting to explore driver-related brain training for teens, the other age group with the highest risk of auto collision. The goal is to change the way the brain works, says POSIT Science CEO Henry Mankey. The programs aren't trying to show you how to merge or how to use turn signals. They're more like a gymnasium for your mind, like how a basketball player goes to the gym to be in shape for games. These exercises are designed to get your brain in shape for driving. Several major companies that offer insurance, including the Auto Club, have teamed with POSIT and other program providers so they can offer brain training software to insureds, especially those who have a teen or senior on their automobile policy. Curious to learn more? Here are answers to a few frequently asked questions. How do brain training programs work? They're more like video games than driving simulators. For seniors, they include exercise focused on strengthening their useful field of view, that is, how well they see and process objects in their peripheral vision. Programs for teens usually include games that improve their ability to keep their eyes on the road despite multiple distractions. The exercises start slowly but get faster with every correct answer and then are repeated. What do these specific exercises look like? In one driver sharp exercise, you'll see an image of a car or a truck on your screen. While you're watching the vehicle in front of you, a road sign will pop up in your peripheral vision. Then you'll have to respond to these questions. Were you following a car or a truck, and where was the sign? One game in Gear, POSIT's online program for teens, shows you 3 or 4 dancing objects and asks you to keep track of them while it adds more objects to the screen. Then one of 2 video game characters pops up on the side of the screen. If it's a bad guy, you have to click a button to get rid of him, then refocus on the objects. Why are the programs different for teen drivers and senior drivers? Both groups are at high risk for traffic accidents, but the reasons behind those crashes are different. According to Mankey, teens tend to get in single-car collisions because they're more prone to distraction. Seniors are more likely to get in a crash in an intersection because they have difficulty dividing their attention between what's in front of them and what's in their peripheral vision. Each program targets and strengthens relevant areas. All right, back to some jury charge practice. II, first element, part 2, object of the conspiracy. The second part of the first element relates to the object or objective of the conspiracy. According to the indictment, the object of the conspiracy charged in count 1 was to commit securities fraud, in particular insider trading by Mr. Martoma on the basis of material non-public information obtained from Dr. Sidney Gilman and Dr. Joel Ross. I have already explained to you the elements of securities fraud through insider trading. If you find that Mr. Martoma agreed with Dr. Gilman or Dr. Ross to accomplish the illegal object charged in the conspiracy count, namely insider trading, the illegal purpose element will be satisfied. Whether or not the alleged conspiracy existed is a fact issue for you to decide. D, second element, membership in the conspiracy. If you conclude that the government has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the charged conspiracy existed and that the conspiracy had as its object the illegal purpose charged in the indictment, then you must determine whether Mr. Martoma participated in the conspiracy with knowledge of its unlawful purpose and in furtherance of its unlawful objective. The government must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Martoma willfully and knowingly entered into the conspiracy with criminal intent, that is, with a purpose to violate the law, and that he agreed to take part in the conspiracy to promote and cooperate in its unlawful objective. Knowingly and willfully have the same meaning that I provided to you in connection with counts 2 and 3. The terms knowingly and willfully are intended to ensure that if you find that Mr. Martoma joined the conspiracy, you also conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that in doing so he knew what he was doing. In other words, that he took the actions in question deliberately and voluntarily. The key question is whether Mr. Martoma entered into the agreement with an awareness of at least some of the basic aims and purposes of the unlawful agreement. Mr. Martoma's participation in the conspiracy may be established by evidence of his own acts or statements, as well as those of the other alleged co-conspirators, and the reasonable inferences which may be drawn from the acts and statements. It is not necessary for the government to show that Mr. Martoma was fully informed as to all the details of the conspiracy in order for you to infer knowledge on his part. To have guilty knowledge, a defendant need not know the full extent of the conspiracy or all of the activities of all of its participants. It is not even necessary for a defendant to know every other member of the conspiracy. In fact, a defendant may know only one other member of the conspiracy and still be a co-conspirator. Nor is it necessary for a defendant to receive any monetary benefit from his participation in the conspiracy, or that he have a financial stake in the outcome. It is enough if he participated in the conspiracy willfully and knowingly, and I have defined those terms. The duration and extent of a defendant's participation has no bearing on his guilt. A defendant need not have joined the conspiracy at the outset. If a defendant joined the conspiracy at any time in its progress, he will be held responsible for all that was done before he joined and all that was done during the conspiracy's existence while he was a member. Moreover, each member of a conspiracy may perform separate and distinct acts. Some conspirators play major roles, while others play minor roles in the scheme. An equal role is not what the law requires. In fact, even a single act may be sufficient to draw a defendant within the scope of the conspiracy. I want to caution you, however, that a person's mere association with a member of a conspiracy does not make that person a member of the conspiracy, even when that association is coupled with knowledge that a conspiracy is taking place. In other words, knowledge without agreement and participation is not sufficient. You may not find that Mr. Martoma is a member of a conspiracy merely because of friendship or a business association with alleged co-conspirators. Similarly, mere discussion of common aims and interests does not necessarily establish membership in a conspiracy. What is necessary is that Mr. Martoma joined in the charged conspiracy with knowledge of its unlawful purpose and with an intent to aid in the accomplishment of its unlawful objective. All right, that will conclude our literary and jury charge practice.